Really glad to be here. It's a new arena for me to be on this Passivhus conference. I will bring you on a journey. I probably will not talk your language because there's no CEO, energy, effectivity or anything in these pictures. But I hope you will cope with me. And I will start actually with this guy. Because I think he's interesting. And he says something interesting, and he says something like this, if I translate it from Swedish into English. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited to what we already know. But imagination is something that we actually will have to understand to see the world in the future. And it's something that we probably have to use more to understand our future. So why have we lost our imagination, our capability to have imagination in our heads? And when I meet real estate owners, they say, but we are not doing imagination stuff, Karolin. We are doing hardcore, bricks and mortar, money, you know. And I say, yes, but what brings money and value into your property? And I think we had to, because the future is so speeding up, so we need to understand the future, and imagination is a key word. Albert Einstein did something called relativitetsteorin. I don't think I am Albert Einstein, but I try to see if placemaking could be actually, could you do a formula for it? And this is a Swedish one. In English it will be F is the standing, M will go for P, and K I'll put it for with like N, S in it too. So what is that? I don't know. See if you can solve it in the end. What have I done? I have done everything I suppose, not almost everything about the placemaking, but I never done it by the school book. So I have done it in different kind of ways, and I've been very questioning through the years, because the way I've done it is not the usual way I've done it. I have developed a part of Stockholm called Sickla. I don't know if you're familiar with the Sickla. It's an old industrial area, actually transformed to something new called Sickla Kvarter. It's culture, retail, offices, and also residential and schools, actually, today. Urban Escape, one of the most largest projects in Stockholm City. It's a bored, forgotten place in the Central Park with violence, prostitution, and everything you can imagine. And when the bank left, we transformed it to something different. So how can you actually transform a block of neighborhoods and buildings that no one wants to sit in to one of the most popular places in Stockholm, and actually the highest rent ever paid for offices? How can you do that? Is it possible? And also I've done cities like Sundsvall. How can you transform a city where no one wants to live, go down to the city, everyone goes to the shopping centers and leave the city? How can you actually work together with all the parties that are in the city to make it great and livable again? When I do city placemaking or projects, I often think that we've forgotten something. We are so keen starting to actually do it, so we don't do our homework. What kind of heart and soul does this place have? What kind of actually history do we bring with us in this project? Are we just building houses, even if it's Passivhus or something different? Do we just do houses, or what do we do? Why do we do it? In what kind of place? Could we learn something from this place and the history that the place has? And the future, and that's what I'm going to talk about. What is the future actually? What do we know about the future? How much effort or knowledge do we actually take care of to imagination, what the future will bring down to what we do in our business? And when I talk today, I really want you to do something. Please, imagination, what I say could actually be transformed into your business. Even if it's scary, because I know that 47.5% when I say imagination has something in the stomach that doesn't feel great. It's interesting. And also, what do we have, what do we miss, and what do we want to create, and what is the concept? This is an is a model that has worked for 22 years, actually.
$200,000 apartments. It's my calculation. We need a lot of apartments here in Sweden just now, new apartments. And 200,000 is a small, it could be 1 million new apartments. Because I think that in 2035, Sweden will have about 30 million inhabitants. Due to the wars in the world and to the climate effects on places where the climate effects has destroyed the land and so. So we need a lot of apartments. But I don't think that we are going to build all of them. The Swedish, I have to see. We want to build climate smart for the future. This is a goal, Swedish climate targets for 2045, adopted by the Riksdag, by the parliament. And it means that today we have about 10 tons carbon dioxide emissions per capita. And in 2045, 0 emissions. 0.9 tons per capita, but also minus 0.9 ton in carbon dioxide storage. And carbon dioxide storage, that is planting trees, using wood for building houses. The Swedish building standards have been the most stringent in the world all years, since the 18th century. And after the oil embargo in the 70s, we got the sharpest in the world building regulations. The Passivhus is a small improvement of the Swedish building code. I borrowed this picture from Wolfgang Feist. The first thing you have to do is to reduce the heat losses, then the support of energy. That's very important for the philosophy. But it isn't very sexy to think about that. We have a Swedish translation of the Passivhus code, and that is so that 5 lights are sufficient for a living room when it's 20 square meters, minus 20 degrees outside and 21 degrees inside, and each candle gives 35 watt. The first passive houses built in Sweden were in Gothenburg, and I designed them. And we think about a good indoor climate all over the year, so they have roof edges and balconies to shade the south houses in the summer. That's good. They were built in 2001 and measured by the Swedish Testing Institute. And as you see, there's a very great difference between the high consumer, 12,000 kilowatt hours, and the low consumer, 5,300. But what is common for all 20 houses that were built is that the heating is 1,200 kilowatt hours a year.
Friendly building. We build passive houses whether the client wants it or not. And we put solar cells on our projects whether the client wants it or not. because I think we need to do now. We have to act. And I'm going to talk about an article I wrote almost a year ago. And I said in this article that the construction industry needs a Greta Thunberg. Imagine if we had a Greta Thunberg in the construction industry that stared in our eyes and said, "How dare you? How dare you build this house? You didn't use the best technology there is. This energy consumption is crap. You calculated it and it's 20% more, it's 50% more, maybe 100% more than you calculated. And you did that in the project before as well. You didn't learn from the project you just did." Imagine if we had a Greta that said, "You must listen to the scientists." When I wrote this, I thought, wait, what does the scientists actually say in our industry? Do we have any scientists that are not belonging to either one part of the construction type of, concrete or wood, or where are the neutral scientists, I was thinking. But today on stage we had several scientists from Germany and Austria, and they spoke about the Passivhus. Maybe we could listen to these scientists. Greta says all the time that the climate crisis has already been solved. We already have all the facts and solutions. All we have to do is to wake up and change. And this is what we've heard today. Passivhus, we've had it for 30 years, almost 28 years. Wolfgang Feist lives in one of them. He lives in the first one. He has measured it for 28 years. Isn't that proof enough? Isn't it proof enough what they've done in Austria? Isn't it this 100,000 proofs out there? What are we waiting for? And in Sweden, it's actually our normal way of building they've copied. Of course, it's much harder in England or in Great Britain when they have to build the way we do, or in China. Remember the buildings they had, they were almost made of, I don't know, what they found in the garden. Imagine when they must do Passivhus, what a big step. For us, it's really nothing. We just learn to put the windows in properly and maybe be more sincere about the airtightness. But that's all we need to learn. Solar cells is not a new thing. I've heard that since I was in high school, I think. And that's a long time ago. We have the roadmaps. If you look at the roadmaps, there's roadmaps for each industry, and there's one for the construction industry. And if you look at the roadmap, they already investigated what we need to do. And most of these is about energy, how we use the energy in the buildings and how we can save it. The red one is about materials. The yellow one is about refurbishing, but refurbishing to use less energy.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Simone and everybody, to invite me here to your conference. It's really nice to be here and make a presentation of the roadmap for the building and construction industry. I know several people of you in the audience. You are very interested and engaged in this work, so it's nice to meet you here as well. As Helmut said, my name is Birgitta Govén, and I work at the Swedish Construction Federation, which is the organization for 3,600 construction companies in Sweden. And I shall talk about this roadmap that Ingrid mentioned. And you can start by asking yourself, why roadmaps? Well, you are perhaps all familiar of that in Sweden we have the national goal on that in 2045 we shall be climate neutral By 2045, we shall be climate neutral. And to be able to reach that goal, the Swedish government put into action some activities. And one of them are the fossil-free Sweden, Fossilfritt Sverige, which is an initiative who makes lots of different activities. And one among them is to put into action different roadmaps. And the whole idea is that the branches themselves shall perform these roadmaps of how shall they be able to reach the goal for climate neutrality by 2045. Because as Ingrid mentioned before, it's always like you ask, oh, can't the politicians do this and can't somebody else do this? But now the roadmaps, the goal with them is that the branch themselves shall be the one who says, this is what we shall do to be able to reach the goal. So we have to start running. I think that we have left from the start blocks. We have been start walking, jogging almost, but soon we must start running because it may sound like a rather long time to 2045, but it isn't. We need to travel and work really hard and fast to be able to do this. This roadmap for the construction and the civil engineering sector was project led by Skanska. Is it anyone from Skanska here today? Oh, that's the first time that I talk and no one is here from Skanska. What does that mean? It's a pity because Skanska, they made a real good work in this. They involved about 170 people in the whole value chain in different workshops and roundtable discussions to be able to perform this roadmap. And together we all formed this sort of goal, and I have marked into red two things. The goal is to gather the whole value chain, because this is the whole idea with our roadmap. If we try to think, if we think that we can do this ourselves, the construction people, my companies, if I may say so, we can't do it because we are dependent on the real estate owners. What do they want for what type of buildings do they want us to build? So we must tell them how we can do the best to get the lowest emission of carbon dioxide. We need to work with the consultants and the architects and talk together of how can we reach the best solutions in the whole value chain. So this is one of the most important things with the roadmap for the construction sector, that it includes the whole value chain. The next red one, you can read the whole goal by yourself, but in the end we say that this shall lead to a competitive Sweden. And we think that that's very important because you have heard about Greta already. I think that everybody wants to be a part of the transmission, but it won't happen if it's not at the same time competitive. It must be, as we say, you must earn money. And we say that when you build a sustainable building, it is competitive, because you must start to count in much longer terms than you do today. For instance, when you talk about renovating buildings, I often hear real estate owners saying that, oh, this must solve itself in perhaps 5 years, or at most 10 years. But a building should stand there for at least 100 years. So we must start to talk in much longer terms. That's one very important thing. So the whole value chain and competitiveness, those are two key words with this roadmap that you should all remember.
Ja, bra. Vilket gäng. Tack.
Wow, this is big!
Wow.
And as I told you, the most important part is whistling, of course. Because you get a lot of people like this, but that's
But I like this one, because this you could email.
yeah, but this has all the data, yes?
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll soon be new one.
Yeah. And